Ben Boardman. I'm a coordinator of the communities team in Extinction Rebellion UK, and I'm making a video here about non-violence and how civil disobedience works within Extinction Rebellion. So non-violence has been shown by the social science to be absolutely critical in winning, in causing system change in the way that we are seeking. And this has been shown by a piece of literature by a woman called Erica Chenoweth and Mary Stefan about why civil resistance works. And what they found by analysing a number of case studies over the last 100 years is that non-violence is twice as likely to succeed as violence is. Over these 300 cases that they looked at, they found that non-violent change was particularly more successful and that it was growingly so over the 20th century. Now, why is that? Well, non-violence is a lot easier for people to get involved with than violence is. And this is a key factor in success is mass participation, getting lots of people involved, young and old. And so the barriers to getting involved with non-violent action are much lower than they are with violent action. So the barriers, let's say, for sitting in a road, for example, the barriers morally and physically and financially are all much lower than they are to someone to pick up a weapon or a gun in some way. Now, this is why non-violence is much more successful. And one of the benefits of non-violence as well is that it's much more likely to lead to democratic transitions after a period of social change than violence is. Violence often leads to civil unrest and totalitarian states within 5 to 10 years of system change. So the social science, it's pretty clear. Non-violence is the way to go. Now, within non-violence, we use civil disobedience to create the change, to create as a key part of our strategy to make the change. And we're in civil disobedience within Extinction Rebellion, this idea of peaceful law breaking to highlight the unjust laws of our society. It has 3 key elements, 3 key logics or reasons for why it works, if you will. So the first logic is around disruption. So it's the disruption that you cause through civil disobedience that causes people to have an emotional reaction to the issue. So this isn't just what we've seen for the last 30 years or so, which is like lots of NGOs talking about the climate crisis and talking about it through stats on TV, putting the facts out there. And while those facts are really important to be credible for the movement, they are not what engages people. We've seen that over the last 30 years. It's not what switches people on to the crisis. Instead, it's this emotional reaction that you feel when you're disrupted. So whether you're going to work and someone blocks the road, or, you try and get on the train and you realize that, you can't get on it because of the people on the tracks. So that emotional reaction you then have, you might feel quite frustrated, and maybe it's a bit similar actually to when I was younger and, I would get told off by my parents and I'd go up to my room and I go, that's ridiculous. How could they tell me off like that? But then a couple of hours later, it would kind of sink into my mind that, maybe they've got a point. and it's that changing of your mind that happens over a period of time that often happens with people in the public as well. So you disrupt the public and then they have this emotional reaction. Some of them may be frustrated, but others may start to really think about the issue, which is crucial. So disruption is also important because it starts to break the social norms of society. And whenever you do that, whenever you do something that's out of place in some way, you're guaranteed to get a lot of media attention, which is really important as well for getting our message out there, talking about what we want to talk about. And disruption is often the first step that people will go through in acting in civil disobedience when they realize the extent of the emergency, the extent of the crisis, because then you feel this obligation to disrupt the system, the status quo as it is, to stop that emergency happening. Now, it's similar to, someone in a theatre, for example, shouting fire because they think there's a fire in the back, or they know there's a fire in the back. Now, when they shout that, they are shouting to disrupt the theatre as it is, but it's to protect everyone who's there. And that's a similar logic that we use when we're using civil disobedience, because we're disrupting but to protect life itself. And the final point about disruption is that we're using it to build pressure against those in power or the government. So when we're doing disruption, it's good to plan out in advance a way in which it's going to build pressure over time. So maybe you do one block of a road, and then you block 3 roads a couple of days later, and then maybe 10 roads on the 5th day. And it's that rapid pressure building, over a period of time that will really start to put the focus on the government and for them to act, and it'll put them in a difficult situation, which is much more likely to win concessions for the rebellion. Now, the second key logic of civil disobedience is around sacrifice. Now, sacrifice is a word that means different things to different people, and in this sense, potentially it's more of a social construct than anything else. But really what I mean is that when people get arrested, for example, for civil disobedience, they are showing that they're willing to suffer for their beliefs. Now, that suffering is completely subjective, obviously. Not everyone who gets arrested will be suffering. Some people might not mind so much having to sit in a cell for a while. But what the more important reaction is that of the public, because obviously that's the people whose minds we're trying to change. And what you'll often get is a reaction from the public, which might be something along the lines of, oh, I'm not, I don't really agree with, the thing about climate change or whatever, but I respect them for standing up for what they believe in. I respect them for suffering for their cause. And that is a really important reaction for people to have, because it starts to bring people slightly more on side of the rebellion, start to think about the issues, start to think about, do they agree with it? Do they not? Another important reaction is that of someone in your social circles, maybe someone from one of your friends or your family, who might also be thinking, oh, I kind of care about the climate crisis. But then when they see someone getting arrested, they go, wow, she's done that. That's amazing. I want to get involved. I want to do something. They become sympathetic but to the cause, because they've seen that someone's suffering for it. And that's going to bring on a large number of people who are sort of similar to those that are already involved. The other key point about sacrifice is it produces a kind of backfiring effect for those in power. So either what was often called in Extinction Rebellion a dilemma action. So either those in power, the police, for example, allow the action to continue, so they allow people to continue sitting in roads and causing the disruption, or they have to repress the action and therefore, start to arrest people. So either way, you're in a win-win scenario, because either they are allowing the disruption to continue and you're kind of provoking, this people to think more about Extinction Rebellion and think about the climate crisis and what it's doing, or they're going to arrest people. And then again, people have this, wow, they stood up for their beliefs, and that's going to get a lot more media attention through that process of sacrifice. So when you're designing actions or when you're thinking about actions, it's always important to think about the dilemma action there. Are you expanding the space for political protest by, continuing with some form of disruption, or are you being repressed and then forced that into the media issue through the number of arrests or whatever it may be? And a kind of common critique here I just want to throw in is, people will say, isn't it bad to get arrested? Isn't that a bad thing? And again, this is one of the kind of social constructs of our society. Bad people get arrested, but lots of good people throughout history who have stood up for civil rights have been arrested. And the important thing to remember, again, about getting arrested is it's the suffering or the process that you go through of that, suffering that will get more people involved in the rebellion. And that's what we've seen so far. Our numbers doubled after the bridges were blocked in November, and again after the April rebellion. So that's a really important logic to remember. So we've got disruption and sacrifice. And the third key logic is around respect. So this is a point to say that not all social change is material. It's not all about just blocking the economic system here or, getting the social group involved here. There's also a really important psychological element to it, which is that the dynamics of social change, are psychological, and that if you are super respectful to people who are in power or authority, then they're much more likely to talk to you. They're much more likely to engage with you, because it's not a kind of us versus them mentality. It's much more like those people are standing up for what they believe in, and they're not having a go at me, but I should probably talk to them about it. That's the kind of mentality people might go through. And this is actually a kind of therapy for people who are in a difficult situation, those in power who need to decide, do we let them stay there or do we arrest them? Well, once that's becomes a really difficult situation, then it becomes much more easy to go, well, they're not actually that rude or anything, so maybe I should just talk to them. And it's through that process that we start to see some of the concessions made to our demands, and getting meetings with the government like we did in April. And obviously, this is a kind of something that's been researched a lot, actually, mainly by relationship counsellors. So it's a process that's called tough love, where you kind of say exactly what you think about the issue, about how you feel, but you do it in a very respectful and calm way, and it kind of allows for better communication between the two people involved. Now that's the three logics of civil disobedience and a bit about nonviolence. And thank you for watching, and enjoy rebelling.